Hi everyone, my name is Mason and I work for Comet Backup here in New Zealand. Welcome along to the Mimas release webinar. Thanks for joining me. I'm coming to you live today. It's 9 AM here in New Zealand, so good morning or good afternoon or evening, whatever time zone you're in. To make the time zones easier, you're welcome to subscribe to notifications about when these webinars go live. It's all on the webinar platform and you can get a notification that shows you in your own time zone when our next presentation will be. After the webinar, we will post the recording on YouTube. So if you're watching the replay on YouTube, then hi, hope the future's cool. But if you are live with me this morning, then thanks for coming along. And as a special thank you for making this live time slot, we're doing a live question and answer session. So we'll take questions as we go. So on the webinar platform, there is a chat widget in the sort of bottom right corner of the screen. You can click the button to pop it open. And if you have any questions during the presentation, just write them in and I'll do my best to answer them at the end. If you're a long-time watcher of the webinar series, welcome back. This is episode 28. And if you're a brand new watcher, here's some essential Comet background information. So first of all, there are 2 release tracks for Comet. Every week, we publish our absolute latest changes as part of our Voyager rolling release series. And you can read more about this in our What's New blog posts every month. And then 4 times a year, all of these changes get bundled up into one new major quarterly release. And we've found having these 2 tracks, it strikes a really good balance of getting that early access, early feedback, and then it builds up into something that our company, qualifies and supports for a longer support period. So by the time you get a quarterly release, it's run the gauntlet, it's battle tested, it's ready for production. And it's up to you which track you follow. We'll say for the majority of our partners who follow the quarterly release cycle, so we've just done that bundling up, and we're very proud to have launched our latest 24.2 Mimas release. So this rolls up all the changes we've made in our Voyager series throughout the last 3 months, December, January, and February. And it culminated in February, and you can see our version numbers are 24.2, so 24 is the year, 2024 in the month. So today I'll be covering the changes and new features we've added in the last 3 months. So that's about the version number and the code name for this release, Mimas. So this release is named after one of Saturn's moons, and all of our releases are named after solar system objects. This is what the moon Mimas looks like. It's a bit smaller than Earth's moon, and as you can see, the first thing everyone says about this picture is this large crater on the surface makes it look like the Death Star from Star Wars. Which came first? Was Star Wars perhaps inspired by this moon? But in fact, this crater was completely unknown what this moon even really looked like. There were very few good photographs of Mimas until the NASA Cassini spacecraft flew by in 2010. And the first Star Wars film was, of course, released back in the 70s, so more than 3 decades earlier. So this is a quite recent photograph. And we're still learning new things about Saturn's moons. Just a few weeks ago, scientists have discovered that Mimas probably has a water ocean underneath its surface. So you can see the news articles using the same picture because it's so sort of striking. So it's really wonderful to see that new discoveries are still being made about our own solar system. So that's where the name comes from, 24.2 Mimas. Enough about the name. What about the features? In the changelog for this release, we've listed 3 new features and 14 enhancements. So these numbers are a little on the small side because it covered the December-January holiday period. And these numbers don't really tell the full story because there's been a really broad range of improvements this quarter and there's a lot of new information to cover. Now, there's a lot of new information. My talk today will probably be about 30 minutes long, and that's including some time for those live questions at the end. I'll do my best to keep to that schedule, but I personally find Comet really interesting, so maybe we'll go on a bit longer. Aiming for 30 minutes, maybe a bit more, but everyone's busy, so I'll try and keep to that schedule. Hope you've got a coffee, get comfortable, settle in, and we'll just get underway. So first of all, the first feature I'd like to talk about, a picture says 1,000 words. What you see here is our current Comet server web interface, and the eagle-eyed amongst you might spot there is a new button near the top with a picture of the sun on it, and with one click the lights go out. That's right, the Comet server web interface now finally supports dark mode theming. So this is a complete overhaul of the look and feel of the web interface that makes Comet fit in better into a dark mode environment. So as I mentioned, you can toggle it from the button in the top right corner, and after you click that button, it will remember your preference for your web browser. And if you've never visited the Comet server web interface before, it will by default do whatever your operating system does. So if you're on Windows or Mac OS, you can control dark mode at a system-wide level, and the browser will pick up on that. So Comet server seamlessly matches the rest of your system. We have inspected every page, every screen, every type of job report, every dialog to make sure that the colors still work even when you have custom branded the Comet server web interface. So if you have enabled custom server branding from the server settings page, maybe you're using a custom logo and custom colors, the dark mode theme will automatically do some color conversions to adapt to that and take that into account. So you'll see your branding color gets subtly used for the highlights, even though the page is still overall dark. So overall, very nice new feature for the dark mode users amongst us. Personally, I admit I'm actually a light mode user, but around Comet head office, we have several technical people who are very strong fans of dark mode. So I'm sure this will be a welcome addition for many people. Available now in Comet 24.2 Mimas. But overall, this is, it's just a cosmetic feature, not anything critical. So why did we build it? One of the reasons we prioritized the development of this feature was its strong showing on our feature voting page. So if you haven't seen this system before, it's available from the resources menu in the Comet account portal. You can request new features or upvote features that other people have requested. And if you upvote or comment on a feature, you'll get notified when the feature is completed or if anything's, significant changes with it. So it's a great way to get notified when new features are available. We look at the system often. We do develop ideas from in here. And when I looked at this yesterday, we were up to 174 completed features that you requested, which is a reasonably high number. The last time I mentioned the feature voting system in this webinar series was 6 months ago. And at that time, we had checked off 155 features. So in 6 months, we completed about 20 features that you requested. So we really are chipping away at it and making real progress with your requests. You've all got a lot of good ideas. But seeing the requests with more upvotes and discussion topics sort of makes things float to the top. And we do look at the system often to help sort of guide and prioritize what we should be developing next. It's not the only thing we look at. It's not the only thing we base our decision making on, but it does play an important part. So please check it out. Here's another feature we completed this quarter that was also a highly upvoted feature request. When you next go to download the Comet Backup Endpoint Client Installer, there is a new download option on the Linux section for .deb package. So Comet has long supported a generic Linux installer here, this option on the right. This download works well for any Linux distro out there, and we will continue to support it. And up until now, we're focused on that sort of basic common denominator installer because the Linux world, it's broad, it's varied, it's full of unique distributions for you to use. And so at first we'd focused our efforts on making something universal. And now as Comet has grown, it's time to focus on improving that experience from something generic into something more perhaps user-friendly for specific distros. And we've chosen .deb as our first step in this direction. Now the reason we chose .deb is I can tell you out of Comet's Linux user base, about half use RPM family distros, Red Hat, CentOS, Rocky, Elmer, and so on, and about half use Debian family distros, that's Ubuntu, Mint, and Neon, and there's about 10% using exotic or uncommon distros like Alpine, Gentoo, and some types of NAS distro. And this market share has informed our decision to work on the Deb package now and a client RPM package in the near future. So to use the package, you just click the button, either download the file directly or use these options to copy the link to your remote SSH server. And then it's as simple as apt install or dpackage install. It's a pretty standard command line for Debian and Ubuntu users. If this is your first time installing the package, you will see some configuration prompts to enter your username, password, and Comet server auth role server address. And these prompts use something called debconf, which is the standard Debian and Ubuntu system for configuring packages. Because the new Comet Backup .deb installer uses debconf, that means you can use standard Debian tools to pre-fill these for bulk deployment or to pre-fill them for silent install. Or if you use a graphical program to install Deb packages, it will integrate with that to give you a graphical pop-up. And that's all possible because we're just using the standard Debian system to ask these questions about what's your username and so on. The deb package is branded. So this is a really interesting feature. When you download the deb package, it's generated on demand by your Comet server, so that the package itself can include your custom branding. And that's reflected when you do app show or look at what packages you've got installed. So it's fully branded and white label, even at the generated.deb level. And because the Comet server can run on Windows as well, we've had to quite a lot of the tool chains and code out there for producing .deb files is very Linux oriented, but we want to be able to produce these from a Windows Comet server, which is a bit of a technical challenge. And so we've had to create a whole new way of generating deb packages from a Windows host OS. And so that involves some new technology, and it's one of the reasons why this has been a bit slow for us to deliver, because we had to invent some new stuff to make this possible. A few more interesting things to point out. This new deb package is interoperable with the classic Linux installer. So you can upgrade from the classic Linux package to the new deb package, and the deb package will understand what's going on and clean up the upgrade properly, and vice versa. Going forward, the classic Linux installer also understands if the deb package has been previously installed, and it will migrate in both directions. So that is two-way upgrade, downgrade, just makes it completely foolproof about which installer you use. And finally, because we know the deb package is going to be used on a Debian family sort of system, that means we can automatically start up Comet when the Linux PC starts up. Yes, finally, this is one of those things that differs between different Linux distros, and so our classic installer couldn't really do this since every Linux distro does this differently. But in the Debian family, we can comfortably say every Debian distro since the last 5 years is a systemd distro. And so we can take advantage of that to start up automatically and just get that better user experience. So 24.2 Mimas, this is a really nice upgrade if you have Linux customers. .deb now, .rpm coming soon for that next set of users. Spent quite a bit of time talking about that. Next one's a quick one. Another neat feature in Comet 24.2 Mimas. There is now a new quick way to access a user's job history. We have added a new tab on the users page. So you click this tab and the data loads automatically. Simple as that. So this is a bit easier to access than the previous solution, which was go to the actions drop down in the top right. But just having the user's job history here on one page, it's much more convenient and natural to see what's going on for a user account. Much more easy to troubleshoot what's going on with their job history. So this is the full job table. It includes completed jobs, it includes still running jobs, and all of the features such as filter, export, custom columns, and so on. They're all still available. And in fact, in 24.2 Mimas, we have also improved what goes into those logs to add some more useful points of information to help with troubleshooting. So for instance, the job logs will now mention the various object lock phases that are involved. As Comet works to ensure that data inside the customer's storage vault is properly marked as immutable as a defense against ransomware, and that processing takes a certain amount of time. And so just having that extra information in the logs is useful. We've also started to log more messages about the first time you connect to a storage vault and making sure that the storage vault is actually accessible before Comet goes to, spends a lot of time trying to talk to something that's not really available. Another thing we've started to log is whether or not the use temporary files instead of RAM option was enabled for the job. So prefer temporary files instead of RAM. It's a feature in Comet that clears out, it removes almost all of Comet's RAM usage. So if you're in a low RAM or RAM constrained environment, the backup job is able to complete at a slower speed, but that's better than running out of memory. So because this option does slow down the backup job, it's interesting for troubleshooting, so having that in the logs is useful. And one more thing we've changed in 24.2 Mimas is there has been a slight change to the order of before commands. So Comet is able to run commands before and after the backup job. That's useful for things like if you have a specialized piece of software or a database to back up, you could have a command that runs before the job to export data, and then Comet Backup runs, and then you could have a command that runs after the job to clean up that exported data now that it's been safely backed up. Comet lets you configure commands for each protected item, but also for each schedule. Maybe on Fridays you want to run a different cleanup command. We also support setting up commands at the storage vault level, and that's useful if you've got a command that lets you log into a network share or unlock some sort of network resource before the job runs. In 24.2 Mimas, we've changed the order so that happens first before the protected item level commands run. I think that's a safe change to make. It means that the storage vault will be accessible for your other protected item level commands. And so it's a reasonably subtle change to make, but I think overall it's a good change. It makes accessing storage vaults more reliable. So lots of improvements to logs, improvements to job history, improvements to the way jobs run, that sort of whole area. Another area that's seen improvements in Comet 24.2 Mimas is the tenants feature. So quick recap, tenants in Comet Server allow you to create a private zone within your Comet Server. That private zone has its own customers and its own branding. So if you're an MSP with a reseller sales model and you have down level sort of sub brands, this can be a really interesting option for you. Tenants are exclusive to Comet Server self-hosted. So if you're a Comet hosted user, you would need to migrate to self-hosted to make use of this sort of advanced functionality. One of the rules about working with tenants is, the tenant is locked into their private sort of zone, and every tenant has their own sort of private zone, but the top level system administrator can see everything and work inside every tenant zone. So in Comet 24.2 Mimas, some of the things we've done to make it easier to work with tenants is creating new user accounts directly into a target tenant. So when you go to create a new user account, you see this little pop-up window. And if you are the top level system administrator and you have tenants set up, you will now see an extra option here. This option that allows you to choose what tenant that user is going to be created into. So simple as that. Nice improvement for people who use multiple tenants inside their self-hosted Comet server. And if you're not in that category, this option will not be visible. In this screenshot, you might notice another change, which is that we have enabled the multiple feature by default. So there are these tabs at the top of the dialog that let you switch between adding a single user and adding multiple users in bulk. And if you switch to the multiple tab, you'll see you can enter multiple usernames to create in a sort of CSV type format. This feature has been available in Comet for a long time now, but we found people didn't really know about it because previously it was hidden behind the advanced options checkbox. The advanced options, you might have seen it in the top right corner of the software under your user menu, and it does expose various extra features like this throughout the Comet server web interface. This bulk user creation was a situation where we thought, this is useful enough. We want to show this in front of more people by default. So that's about adding users. This slide's meant to be about tenants. Another feature we've added for tenant administrators is, as a top level administrator, previously when you look at all your users, you would see a lot of little badges that just says belongs to other tenant. And we've improved that to display the name of the other tenant. So just makes managing a large user base a bit easier to see what's going on. And as well as that, you can type a tenant's name into the filter box on the users page or the devices page, and it will properly show you just the users of that target tenant. So that's nice. A quick slide about API news. So the Comet server web interface that you all use, it's entirely built using our public API. No tricks, it's the same public API that we document. So anything that you do in the web interface can be done by the API. So if you're a programmer or if you can hire a programmer, the sky's the limit with what's possible. You could build out automation, bulk capabilities, management, reporting, e-commerce. The API lets you do anything with Comet. We're very proud of our API and how easy it is to use. We have great documentation and even live YouTube tutorials. But we are constantly trying to make it even easier. And part of that is releasing what's called SDKs, software development kits, which are helper libraries for different programming languages to help make the API even easier to use. In this quarter, we released a new Java SDK that helps you access the Comet Server API from the Java programming language. So Java is a language that's been available since 1995. It's still very popular. It's cross-platform. It's used for both small applications and major enterprise applications. And our new SDK for Java is available on GitHub. It's fully open source under the MIT license. And as well as that, if you're a Java programmer, you'll mostly use a package manager to access your Java libraries. And so we've got this SDK up on Maven Central. So Java developers and also other JVM language developers, Scala, Kotlin, and so on, can easily access and make use of this new SDK. This is the sixth one of these SDKs we've produced. This new Java SDK is in good company. It joins our family of other existing SDKs for various languages, and Java is now the sixth we have available. But even if we don't support your programming language, it's still easy to get started because the whole API is just JSON over HTTP. And so these SDKs make it easier to use the API, but it's still possible to use it from almost any programming language under the sun. We even have an example of someone using the Comet Server API from inside a Microsoft Excel workbook. So, if the API works in Excel, then it can work anywhere. A few pieces of news for storage templates. So just to recap, there's lots of ways to use storage in Comet. You can have your self-hosted Comet server host the storage itself, and all of the customers can back up to your server. And we call this storage role because the Comet server is taking on the role of providing that storage. It's a quite traditional thing. It's an excellent option for lots of people, especially if you are on-prem or in your own data center. But of course, cloud storage is a real trend in our industry. And so if you don't want to rack your own hard drives, then the options for using cloud storage with Comet, one way is to use cloud storage as a backend proxy for that self-hosted storage role capability. So data would flow from the customer's endpoint PC to your Comet server storage role, which would then forward it onto cloud storage. And that's seamless. It's easy to set up. It works with any cloud provider, and the cloud provider is completely hidden. There's no way the customer can find out who's on the other side of that. But it's a little bit bandwidth intensive for your Comet server to sit there proxying all this data back and forth. It consumes a sort of non-trivial amount of system resources to do so. So instead of doing this, it's more efficient if you can configure the clients to back up directly to a cloud provider. Then you don't need any of that overhead. Your server costs are lower. The architecture is simpler. In this approach, we would recommend it. It's our recommended approach, but there are two main downsides. One is for white labeling. If you are rebranding the Comet app, we can change what the app looks like. We can change the labels in the UI, but we can't hide where the network traffic is going. So if data is sent to some, cloud provider URL, that's going to be visible in the customer's firewall app. And the other downside is provisioning and management. It's obviously essential that each end user customer has their own private storage location with its own private credentials, obviously. And within the Comet server, that's easy for us to manage. But when you're dealing with an external cloud storage vendor, the ability to remotely set up additional private subkeys for new Comet customers is quite specialized capability. And so storage templates are our system for provisioning new direct access keys on a private customer by customer basis. So this is really the ultimate goal. It gives you the best performance. However, there are a limited number of vendors that it works with. So of course, Backblaze B2, Wasabi Storage, Amazon AWS, and our very own Comet storage powered by Wasabi Imprint. So between these vendors, you should find a reasonable option that suits your business. But in case you don't, how can you get the benefits of the storage template provisioning with your own local, storage vendor? And we've got an answer for that, which is the custom remote bucket system. So custom remote bucket, it's a plugin system where Comet can talk to anything if you build a plugin for it. And the way this works is you host a web server, Comet reaches out to your server, you provision the bucket, you give the credentials back to Comet, Comet fills those in into the user's settings. So very straightforward system, quite extensible. So this is all pre-existing. What's new in Comet 24.2 Mimas is we've added some new options to the custom remote bucket to support allowing these custom headers in the provision request. So for instance, this lets you add authentication if you're wanting to make your plugin available to different MSPs, or any sort of configuration for the request. Another thing that's new in Comet 24.2 Mimas is when you look through the list of options for template providers, you will see quite a lot of object lock variant options. So in Comet 24.2 Mimas, we've extended this down to the generated storage vaults too. So you'll see object lock more consistently available across the different direct storage types. And lastly, about storage, we've been working closely with another major cloud storage vendor, and we will be able to make an announcement about that shortly. Performance. So we've made Comet faster, and I'm going to make this slide fast too. There are a few key areas in Comet 24.2 Mimas where we have notably improved the performance. And the headline for this is Office 365. Our protected item type to back up your Microsoft 365 emails, contacts, calendars, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams files. This backup type is now significantly faster, especially for incremental backups and for OneDrive files. We've made fundamental improvements in this area, reworked a lot of the logic. You should find the backups to be, in some cases, orders of magnitude faster. Not only faster, but also more reliable, because as the speed has improved, that means we are fast enough now to not hit as many of Microsoft's rate limits. And that means fewer issues overall. So phenomenal improvement here for Office 365. If you've tried the Office 365 protected item type in Comet before, try it again, because this latest update is a real game changer. That's not all. Object lock is now faster. So when you use object lock mode in Comet, it's a defense against ransomware. The idea is that even if ransomware takes over the PC, opens up this settings dialog, manages to extract the access key and secret key, goes into the bucket, deletes everything using Comet's own credentials, it should be impossible, because the storage, every object inside it is locked, and a locked object can't be deleted, it can't be tampered with for a certain number of days, and that gives you sort of a window of defense against anyone, even using Comet's own credentials. So a great security feature, a perfect defense against ransomware. But it does come with a performance cost, because Comet has to do some extra bookkeeping to lock all the objects as required. So in the latest Comet 24.2 Mimas, we've added some more tricks, some batch processing, some better multi-threading, some better work overlapping, to get this process down much faster. So you should see an up to 16 times improvement in the object lock phase. And this goes hand in hand with the feature I mentioned earlier to log more details about exactly what is Comet doing. So you can clearly see what part of the time Comet is spending working on this extra object lock work. But you can't put a price on safety. So even if object lock does slow things down a little, it's worth it for that extra defense. And simulated restore mode is faster. Now, I'm not sure if many of you have tried out this feature, but when you go to restore data in Comet, there's this top drop-down option, and you can restore data to local files, you can restore data into a zip or tar file, or you can do this option, simulate restore only. And when you choose this option and go to restore, Comet does all the work of restoring, decompressing, undeduplicating, I'm not sure if that's really a word, but all of the work that Comet does to restore data, reassemble chunks back together, perform decryption, hash verification. It's ready to save the file, and then at the very last second, it simply throws the data away instead of saving it onto the disk. So this lets you verify that the restore really would work, but without requiring any extra local disk space for that test. So if you're trying to verify if a very large backup, will it restore correctly? You can use this option, and it verifies every step of the Comet restore process, but just doesn't do that last final save. So really neat option. Since this feature was developed some years ago, we've sort of left it alone without having it take advantage of some of the other improvements that have taken place in the regular restore mode, to the point where a regular restore could actually be faster than the simulated one. So in Comet 24.2 Mimas, we've combined and unified a lot of the internal logic there, and now simulated restore has been brought up to speed with all of last quarter's improvements to the restore speed. So this is a great speed improvement for the simulated restore mode. So great improvements, much faster in some pretty key areas. So Comet 24.2 Mimas, you should find it better all around. So this is my last slide. We've announced some changes to our pricing related to the supported protected item types. Most prices aren't changing. And we've communicated this out in an email already to existing partners, but if you haven't read your emails, then we've got 3 changes to announce. First of all, for VMware. So we launched our VMware protected item type just 3 months ago in 23.11 Saturn. And VMware, we announced it using per VM pricing. So we'd charge for each guest virtual machine. And what we are announcing is we are lowering the price of VMware Backup by introducing a fixed host price cap for unlimited virtual machines on a single host priced at $39. So if you have 8 or more virtual machines on a single host, this new cap will apply automatically and you will be able to back up unlimited guest virtual machines at no extra charge. So a great price discount for VMware users with that larger number of virtual machines. We've also made a change for our Hyper-V support. Until now, Comet's Hyper-V protected item type was only charged per host, and it's a bit confusing why the pricing model was so different compared to VMware. So just in order to bring this into alignment with VMware, we are moving Hyper-V also to a per guest price model like VMware at $3 per VM guest. At the same time, we are removing the $2 per device fee for it. So if the server is solely doing Hyper-V backup and you're not backing up anything else on the host, you shouldn't have to pay the $2 per device. Only the VM charge, so that's cheaper in some ways. And as with VMware, there will also be a fixed price cap for unlimited guest virtual machines on a single physical host. Now, we're not tracking CPU cores or sockets. There's nothing you need to change at your end to get this unlimited pricing. Just one physical Hyper-V host. Once you have 8 or more virtual machines on a single Hyper-V host server, that price is capped at $24 for unlimited virtual machines. So that takes effect automatically. So overall, VMware price down a little, Hyper-V price up a little, but most importantly, this is it for our sort of 2024 market price alignment for these 2 protected item types. So it's simple for low volume guests or high volume with the unlimited. Doesn't really matter which hypervisor you use because the pricing models are in line with each other. If you're an existing Comet partner, this change will be gradually stepped in over a bit longer time frame to give you time to adjust any contracts with your own customers, and that's been communicated out separately, so check your emails for the full details. Now there is a third change, which is not necessarily a pricing change, but regarding the Windows System Backup protected item type. Now this is a feature that Comet has had ever since we first launched about 8 years ago. And it's sort of an early version of the disk image protected item type. It let you take disk image backups, but with a lot of caveats. In particular, it required you to buy a whole second hard drive to use as a temporary storage location. So it's really inefficient, not really viable. And ever since we launched Comet's built-in disk image protected item type, it's much faster, it's more efficient, it doesn't require any extra storage space. And so ever since that launch, this previous Windows System Backup option, it's been superseded really. So in Comet 24.2 Mimas, we are making the first steps towards making that official and deprecating the old type. Now, this is the first time in Comet we've ever removed a protected item type. And so there's some process to be involved. So we've removed the protected item type from the marketing, pricing, documentation pages to discourage new uptake of it, phasing it out for new users. And then it's a matter of converting the existing users. So if you've got just a small number of users using the Windows System Backup protected item type, I'd advise changing them to disk image just for the better performance and to get ahead of any changes that are coming soon. But if you're a larger partner with a complicated user base, lots of customers, it's obviously not going to be as easy. And so the timeline of this process is you're not required to make any changes just yet. But in our next quarterly release, the protected item type will start showing a notice message in the backup job to say, please convert the settings. And as well as that, we will release a one-click migration tool that will convert all of your legacy Windows System Backup customers to our modern supported disk image type instead. So for 24.5, it's still an opt-in process. And then in 24.8, we will make that conversion happen automatically to convert all the protected items. So, so the customers' backups are going to keep working, and then one day they're going to get converted, and they'll just be faster and more efficient. So that's nice. It's actually it's a bit crazy that Comet has had two ways of backing up disk image for so long. Really, just cleaning house, having one good way of doing it. So simplifying that makes Comet easier to use, and also simplifying and standardizing our pricing across the VMware and Hyper-V hypervisor platforms. So that's all I have for today. Are there any questions? So just to recap, I talked about a whirlwind tour of some of the features and enhancements this quarter in our latest Comet 24.2 Mimas release version. I talked about the new dark mode for the Comet server web interface. I talked about the feature voting system, the new .deb client installer for Linux for Debian and Ubuntu customers. I talked about the quick access to job history and all of the new information we've added to the logs to improve your troubleshooting. I talked about tenants, being able to create users directly within a tenant and being able to see and filter by tenant names. I talked about our API, the brand new Java SDK available now on GitHub and Maven Central. Storage templates, all the different ways to use Comet storage, especially with the improvements to Comet custom remote bucket and object lock. The improved performance in 24.2 Mimas, major improvements for Office 365 backups. Also really important improvements for object lock and simulated restore. And of course the pricing change, unlimited virtual machines cap for VMware, standardize the pricing for Hyper-V, and our plan to replace the old Windows system backup type with our modern disk image type. So I've got a few questions here. One question, are we notified of the result of simulated restore? Does simulated restore work for all backup types or just disk image? Simulated restore, it creates an ordinary restore job inside Comet. You'll see it on the job history. You will get success, failure, status notifications about it. You can configure them for email reports if you want. And yes, it works for all backup types, not just disk image. There's another question here. Does VMware Backup also back up Hyper-V and Proxmox? So we need to support them separately. Comet has a protected item type for Hyper-V, and we have a protected item type for VMware. The VMware supports ESXi and vSphere. We don't have Proxmox support, although it's been extremely popular to ask this recently. The only thing I can say for now is please search for Proxmox on our feature request page and click the upvote button, and you will join a large community of people who will be notified when we have anything to announce in this area. Another question here, will restores still work with Windows System Backup? So Windows System Backup, we launched it early on because it's basically a Microsoft product that Comet is integrating with. So Windows System Backup is a Microsoft product really, and it's the way you restore from a Windows System Backup is you boot into the Windows recovery environment and then you choose the recovery options through that method. For disk image, for Comet's built-in disk image mode, the process is similar but not exactly the same. You boot into Comet's recovery environment and then restore that way. So inside the Comet Backup desktop app, in the settings, in the top right corner button, there's an option to create recovery media, and that will let you create a USB drive or an ISO file that boots into Comet and lets you do a disk image restore. So the process, yeah, it's similar. It's not exactly the same. However, disk image backup in Comet is actually much more featureful because, for instance, even if you're doing a block level disk image backup, Comet allows you to do granular restore of individual files from within that backup. So you may find that it's actually a reasonable alternative in some cases. There's another question here. Are there any plans for automated or scheduled simulated restores? Yes, there are plans where it's an extremely highly upvoted feature on our feature request system. We're absolutely aware of it. We've done some planning in this area, and I don't have anything more to announce today, but you can expect that Comet will get this in a future version of Comet. Another question here, do you suggest using a new bucket for the disk backup and then removing the old system backup to save on the storage costs? That's a really interesting point. You can do it that way, yes. It depends how much you value your previous retention and your previous snapshots. If you've got obligations to keep them for a longer period of time, obviously you wouldn't want to remove them. I personally wouldn't worry about this too much. We expect, when you change from Windows System Backup to disk image backup, the data that's being backed up is fundamentally similar and it's going to deduplicate extremely well together. So because of deduplication, the storage overhead of switching types, there's going to be a little bit of overhead because the data format is not identical. I would just switch it directly, I think, and not worry about it. The other option is to switch it directly and then let the old Windows System backup jobs sort of age out of retention just as normal. I think that's all the questions we have time for today. Thanks, everyone. That's quite a lot of questions. But we still want to hear from you. If you have any questions at all, we are always happy to help out. We're more than happy to hear your questions by ticket through the usual ticket system at account.cometbackup.com, or you can email us, hello@cometbackup.com. Or did you know that we do support phone calls? Our company is based in New Zealand. We do have international support teams for that sort of round-the-clock level 1 technical support. But if you want a sales call, or if you want any more advanced technical support or troubleshooting, we'll need to figure out a good time that suits both us in New Zealand and in your country. So in the Southern Hemisphere, we're in our summertime, UTC plus 13. So that makes scheduling a bit more complicated, but still all you have to do is go to the Comet website. At the bottom of the page, you click Contact Us, and then there's an option to schedule a phone call with a time zone widget showing our available times, and it will just work out everything for you. We're more than happy to jump on a call, and often that's a very quick way of clearing the air and getting answers to any questions you might have. So that's all from me. Hopefully you've managed to take away some useful information, so please check out the latest version of Comet 24.2 Mimas. All users of the previous quarterly series, 23.11 Saturn and earlier, are encouraged to upgrade, but we're happy for you to continue using older quarterly versions if you feel like it. Hope you're all keeping well and safe, and you can expect another webinar for the next quarterly release in 3 months' time. Cheers.